When exhausted housekeeper Jasmine Cole fell asleep on billionaire CEO Graham Westfield's sofa after working 3 jobs in one day, she never expected it would change both their lives forever. What began as an embarrassing mistake blossomed into an extraordinary love story told through secret notes left around his penthouse. Graham, trapped in a world of wealth and loneliness, found peace in Jasmine's words, while she discovered a man who truly saw her when the rest of the world looked right through her. This is a story about finding love in the most unexpected places and the courage it takes to choose your heart over everything else. Before we start this story, comment below from where you are watching us. Jasmine Cole rubbed her tired eyes as she pushed her cleaning cart into the service elevator of the Westfield Tower. It was Thursday evening, and this was her 3rd job of the day. She had been up since 4:30 that morning, cleaning hotel rooms across town, then spent the afternoon caring for Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman with arthritis who needed help with everything from cooking to bathing. Now at 7 p.m., she was starting her evening shift cleaning the penthouse apartment of Graham Westfield, the CEO of Westfield Hotels. She never complained, though. Complaining wouldn't pay the bills. "Hold the door, please," a woman called out. Jasmine quickly pushed the button, holding the elevator for a smartly dressed executive type. The woman barely acknowledged Jasmine as she stepped in, her eyes fixed on her phone. That was typical in this building. The cleaning staff might as well be invisible. As the elevator climbed to the top floor, Jasmine thought about her grandfather. It had been 2 years since Reverend Cole passed away, leaving her alone in the world. He had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was just 8 years old. "Hard work and faith, Jazzy," he used to say. "That's what gets you through the hard times." She was certainly working hard. Faith was sometimes harder to hold on to. The elevator doors opened at the penthouse level. Jasmine pushed her cart out and used her keycard to enter the apartment of Graham Westfield, a man she had glimpsed only a few times in the 6 months she'd been cleaning his home. The penthouse was immaculate, as always. Mr. Westfield was rarely there, and when he was, he barely disturbed anything. Sometimes she wondered why he even needed a cleaning service, but she wasn't about to question the steady paycheck. Jasmine moved through her routine efficiently, dust the living room, vacuum the plush carpets, clean the kitchen that looked like it was never used, change the bedding in the master bedroom with its view of the entire city. By 9:30 p.m., she had finished everything except the study. As she pushed open the heavy wooden door, she was startled to find a coffee cup on the desk and papers spread across the surface. Mr. Westfield must have been working from home today. She carefully cleaned around the papers, not moving anything on the desk. The cleaning service had strict rules about that. Never disturb the client's belongings, never read their papers, never touch anything personal. As she finished vacuuming the study, Jasmine felt the exhaustion of her 16-hour day hit her all at once. The room seemed to spin slightly. She sat down on the edge of the leather sofa just to tie her shoes, which had come undone. "Just need to rest for a minute," she murmured to herself. The leather was soft, welcoming. She leaned back just for a moment, just to catch her breath. And then, without planning to, without even realizing it was happening, Jasmine Cole fell asleep on Graham Westfield's sofa. Graham Westfield walked into his penthouse just after midnight. The board meeting had run late, as usual. His father had always taught him that the last person to leave the room was the winner, so Graham made it a point to outlast everyone. His father's lessons had served him well in business. In life, that was another story. He loosened his tie as he walked toward his study. At 32, Graham had built the Westfield hotel chain into one of the most exclusive luxury brands in the world. Every detail was scrutinized. Every employee was held to the highest standard. Graham accepted nothing less than perfection. It made him very rich. It made him very lonely. As he pushed open the door to his study, he stopped abruptly. There was someone on his sofa. His first instinct was to call security. Then he recognized her, the cleaning woman. She was fast asleep, still in her uniform, her cleaning supplies nearby. Graham's immediate reaction was annoyance. This was unprofessional. She should be fired immediately. But something stopped him. The woman, he struggled to remember her name, Jasmine, that was it, looked completely exhausted. Her face, relaxed in sleep, showed a peacefulness that struck him. When was the last time he had slept that deeply? He stood there for several minutes, watching her. There was something almost beautiful about her surrender to exhaustion. She hadn't planned this. She had simply reached her limit. Graham backed out of the room quietly and went to his bedroom. He returned with a light blanket, which he carefully placed over her. Then he went to his desk, took out a sheet of his personal stationery, and wrote a note. He placed it on the coffee table where she would see it when she woke, then turned out the lights and left the study, closing the door behind him. Jasmine woke with a start. Sunlight was streaming through the windows of a room she didn't recognize. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Then it all came flooding back. The cleaning job. Sitting down for just a moment, falling asleep. "Oh no!" she gasped, jumping to her feet. The blanket that had been covering her fell to the floor. Blanket? She didn't remember having a blanket. She checked her watch. 6:15 a.m. She had slept through the night. She had never done anything so unprofessional in her life. She would surely be fired. As she frantically gathered her cleaning supplies, she noticed a folded piece of paper on the coffee table. Her name was written on the outside in neat blue handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened it. "You fell asleep here like someone who finally stopped fighting gravity. I watched you sleep, not to intrude, but to remember what peace looks like when it isn't paid for." It was signed simply GW. Jasmine read the note 3 times, her heart pounding. Mr. Westfield had seen her asleep on his sofa, and instead of calling security or firing her on the spot, he had left her a note. A strangely poetic, almost gentle note. She didn't know what to make of it. She quickly finished gathering her things, made sure the study was in perfect order, and hurried out of the apartment, the note tucked safely in her pocket. Later that morning, Jasmine called her supervisor at Elite Cleaning Services. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Perkins. I fell asleep at Mr. Westfield's apartment. It was completely unprofessional, and I understand if you need to let me go." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's strange," Mrs. Perkins said. "I haven't received any complaints. In fact, Mr. Westfield's assistant called this morning to confirm that you would be handling the penthouse cleaning this evening as usual." Jasmine was stunned. "So, I'm not fired?" "Not unless you want to be," Mrs. Perkins said. "Is there something else going on that I should know about?" No, Jasmine said quickly. "I just wanted to be honest about what happened. It won't happen again." After hanging up, Jasmine sat on the edge of her bed in the small apartment she had shared with her grandfather. The walls were still covered with his favorite Bible verses and family photos. She took out Mr. Westfield's note and read it again. What did it mean? Was he making fun of her? Was he being kind? In 6 months, she had barely seen the man, and he had never spoken directly to her. He was known throughout the company as being cold, demanding, and distant. Yet the note seemed almost tender. That evening, Jasmine returned to the penthouse, determined to be extra thorough and efficient. She would not make the same mistake twice. The apartment was empty as usual. She went through her routine, cleaning each room meticulously. When she reached the study, she hesitated before entering. This was where it had happened. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The room was exactly as she had left it that morning, except for one thing. On the coffee table was another folded piece of stationery. Again, her name was written on the outside. She picked it up with unsteady hands and read, "You work harder than anyone I've ever met, and still, you smiled in your sleep. I envy that." It was signed GW again. Jasmine sat down on the sofa, the same spot where she had fallen asleep the night before. Mr. Westfield had noticed her, really noticed her, not just as someone who cleaned his home, but as a person. When was the last time anyone had really seen her? Since her grandfather died, she had been so focused on survival, on keeping up with the bills, on staying afloat, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen. Something stirred inside her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Graham Westfield sat in the back of his chauffeur-driven car, staring at his phone. There were dozens of emails demanding his attention, but he couldn't focus on any of them. His thoughts kept returning to the cleaning woman, Jasmine Cole. He had asked his assistant to pull her employee file that morning. 25 years old, excellent performance reviews, never late, never called in sick, working for Elite Cleaning Services for 3 years. What he couldn't figure out was why he had left her that note, or the second one this evening. Graham didn't do personal, he didn't do emotional. His father had taught him that business was business, and feelings were a weakness that could be exploited. Never let them see who you really are, his father had said countless times. Keep your cards close to your chest. Graham had followed that advice his entire life, building walls around himself so high that no one could scale them. His relationships, few as they were, remained superficial. Women were attracted to his wealth and power, not to him. Not that he let anyone get close enough to know the real him anyway. So why had he written those notes to Jasmine Cole? Perhaps it was the vulnerability of seeing her asleep, completely unguarded. Or maybe it was the realization that this woman worked so hard, probably for a fraction of what he spent on a single business dinner. Whatever the reason, something about Jasmine had breached his carefully constructed defenses. And instead of rebuilding those walls immediately, as he normally would, Graham found himself wanting to create another crack, another opening. He picked up his phone and sent a text to his assistant. Make sure Jasmine Cole is assigned to the penthouse cleaning for the foreseeable future. The next day, Jasmine arrived at Mrs. Henderson's apartment for her afternoon caregiving shift. The elderly woman was seated in her favorite armchair, watching a soap opera on television. How you're glowing today, Jasmine, Mrs. Henderson observed, muting the TV. Something good happen? Jasmine hadn't realized her emotions were so visible. Nothing special, she said, setting down her bag and starting to prepare Mrs. Henderson's lunch. Don't give me that, the older woman said with a smile. I've been around long enough to know when someone's got a spring in their step. Is it a man? Jasmine laughed. Not exactly. Well, whatever it is, it looks good on you. You work too hard, you know. Your grandfather would want you to have some joy in your life. Jasmine paused at the mention of her grandfather. I know, she said softly. I'm just trying to make ends meet, like he taught me. Solomon Cole taught you more than just hard work, Mrs. Henderson said firmly. He taught you about faith and love and finding beauty in this world. Don't forget those lessons while you're running yourself ragged. Jasmine nodded, thinking about the notes from Mr. Westfield. Perhaps it was time to remember those other lessons her grandfather had taught her. Later that evening, as she cleaned the penthouse, Jasmine made a decision. When she finished the study, she took out a piece of paper from her bag and wrote a short note of her own. You don't have to envy peace, you can create it, but you'll have to slow down long enough to feel it. She left it tucked into the fresh towel she had placed in the master bathroom. It was a bold move, possibly even a foolish one. But something told Jasmine that Graham Westfield needed to hear those words as much as she had needed to hear his. As she left the penthouse that night, Jasmine felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, the fluttering of possibility, the gentle awakening of her heart. What she didn't know was that Graham Westfield was in his office across town, thinking about her, and that tomorrow he would make a decision that would change both their lives forever. Graham Westfield stood in his bathroom, staring at the note he had found tucked between the fresh towels. He read it again. You don't have to envy peace. You can create it, but you'll have to slow down long enough to feel it. No signature, but he knew who had written it. Jasmine Cole, the cleaning woman who had fallen asleep on his sofa 2 nights ago. The woman he couldn't stop thinking about. Graham ran his hand through his dark hair. What was he doing? He was CEO of Westfield Hotels, responsible for thousands of employees and millions in revenue. He didn't have time for whatever this was. Yet he found himself reaching for a pen and paper. Peace has never been a priority for me, he wrote. Success has. But lately I've been wondering what I'm missing. He hesitated, then added, Thank you for the reminder. He signed it, GW, and left it on his nightstand, where she would find it when she cleaned later that day. This exchange of notes was unprofessional, possibly even inappropriate, but something about it felt right in a way few things had in his life lately. Jasmine was surprised to find Graham Westfield's reply when she arrived for her evening shift. She hadn't expected him to respond to her note. She had half convinced herself she would be fired for overstepping. She read his words several times, feeling a connection to this man she had barely seen. There was loneliness in his note, a hint of something missing despite all his success. It reminded her of something her grandfather used to say, the richest man in the world is poor without love. As she cleaned the penthouse that evening, Jasmine thought about her own life. She was working 3 jobs just to keep her grandfather's apartment, to pay off his medical bills, to survive. But was she living? When she reached the kitchen, she noticed something different. On the counter was a small basket filled with fresh fruit, pastries, and a carton of orange juice. A note was propped against it. You work long hours. Please help yourself. GW. Jasmine stared at the basket. The gesture was so unexpected, so thoughtful, that she felt tears spring to her eyes. She took an apple from the basket and bit into it as she continued cleaning. When she was finished with the apartment, she wrote another note and left it on his desk. I had the apple. It was the sweetest thing I've tasted in a long time, both the fruit and the kindness behind it. Thank you. Jasmine. It was the first time she had signed her name. The next morning, Graham sat in his corner office at Westfield headquarters, trying to focus on the quarterly reports. The numbers were good, excellent in fact, but he couldn't concentrate. His assistant, Margaret, entered with his schedule for the day. You have the executive committee at 10, lunch with the mayor at noon, and the marketing presentation at 2, she said efficiently. Graham nodded absently. Is everything all right, Mr. Westfield? Margaret asked. In the 5 years she had worked for him, she had never seen him so distracted. Fine, he said curtly. Then, after a pause, Margaret, do you know the cleaning woman who does my penthouse, Jasmine Cole? Margaret looked surprised. Not personally, sir. Elite Cleaning Services handles all the staffing. Would you like me to speak with them about something? No, Graham said quickly. I was just curious about her background. Margaret raised an eyebrow but said nothing. That will be all, Graham said, turning back to his reports. After she left, Graham opened his desk drawer and took out the note Jasmine had left. The sweetest thing I've tasted in a long time. The words echoed in his mind. When was the last time he had done something kind, without expecting anything in return? When was the last time he had connected with someone who wasn't trying to get something from him? He couldn't remember. That evening, Jasmine arrived at her grandfather's church for the weekly community dinner. She had been volunteering there since she was a teenager, and even with her busy schedule, she never missed it. There's my favorite helper, Pastor Williams greeted her warmly. We've got a full house tonight. The church basement was filled with people from the neighborhood, families struggling to make ends meet, elderly folks living alone, a few homeless individuals who knew they could always get a hot meal here on Thursday nights. As Jasmine helped serve the food, she found herself thinking about Graham Westfield. What would he think of this place, of these people, of her life outside his pristine penthouse? Later, as she was cleaning up, Pastor Williams approached her. You seem different lately, Jasmine. Lighter somehow. Jasmine smiled. Pastor Williams had been her grandfather's closest friend. He knew her better than almost anyone. I've been thinking a lot about what Grandpa used to say about finding joy even in the hardest times, she said. Solomon was a wise man, Pastor Williams nodded. He also believed that everyone deserves grace, no matter how high or low their station in life. Jasmine considered his words as she finished her work at the church and headed to her evening shift at the penthouse. When she arrived, she found another note waiting for her. My father taught me that success was measured by what you own. Your note made me wonder if there are other measures I've been ignoring. G.W. Jasmine held the note close to her heart. There was something happening between them, a connection forming through these simple exchanges. It both thrilled and frightened her. That night, after finishing her cleaning, she left a longer note than usual. My grandfather raised me after my parents died. He was a preacher at Hope Community Church. He taught me that the true measure of a person isn't what they own but what they give. Not just money, but time, kindness, attention. I try to remember that on the hardest days. Jasmine. For 2 weeks, their notes continued. Each day, Jasmine would find a message from Graham, and each evening she would leave one for him. They shared small pieces of themselves, building a bridge between their very different worlds. Graham wrote about the pressure of running his father's company, about board meetings where he was still treated like the son rather than the CEO, about nights when sleep eluded him. Jasmine wrote about her 3 jobs, about caring for Mrs. Henderson, about her community at the church, about her dreams of someday opening a small catering business. Neither of them mentioned meeting face to face. This unusual connection they had formed existed in a space between worlds, safe on paper. Until the day Graham decided to change that. Jasmine arrived at the penthouse for her usual evening shift and was surprised to find the door opened by Graham's assistant, Margaret. Good evening, Ms. Cole, Margaret said formally. Mr. Westfield asked me to inform you that you have been given the night off with pay. Jasmine's heart sank. Was this it? Had he tired of their notes? Was he letting her go gently? I don't understand, she said. Is something wrong with my work? Not at all, Margaret assured her. Mr. Westfield was quite clear that your services have been exceptional. He simply requested that you take this evening off. He also asked me to give you this. Margaret handed her an envelope. Thank you, Jasmine said, taking it with unsteady hands. She waited until she was in the elevator before opening it. Inside was a card with an address in the Upper East Side. Not the Westfield Tower where the penthouse was located, but another building nearby. A time was written below it, 7:30 p.m. That was just an hour away. There was also a note. If you're willing, I'd like to meet the woman behind the words that have come to mean so much to me. No pressure. Your choice. G.W. Jasmine leaned against the elevator wall, her heart pounding. This was real. Graham Westfield wanted to meet her. Actually meet her. Not as the cleaning woman, but as herself. She looked down at her uniform. She couldn't go like this, but she didn't have time to go all the way home and change. As she exited the building, Jasmine made a quick decision. She took a taxi to a department store a few blocks away and used some of her carefully saved money to buy a simple blue dress and low heels. She changed in the store's fitting room, putting her uniform into the shopping bag. At 7:25, she stood outside the address Graham had given her, gathering her courage. It was a smaller, more discreet luxury building than the Westfield Tower. She gave her name to the doorman, who nodded as if he had been expecting her, and directed her to the elevators. "Penthouse," he said simply. Of course, another penthouse. As the elevator climbed, Jasmine's doubts multiplied. What was she doing? She was a cleaning woman with 3 jobs and mountains of debt. Graham Westfield was one of the wealthiest men in the city. They lived in completely different worlds, but then she remembered the words they had shared, the connection they had formed through those simple notes. That was real. Whatever happened next, that was real. The elevator doors opened directly into an apartment. It was smaller than Graham's other penthouse, but still luxurious. The curtains were open, revealing a stunning view of the city lights. Candles burned on several surfaces, casting a warm glow throughout the space. And there, standing by the window, was Graham Westfield. Jasmine had seen him a few times from a distance, but never this close. He was taller than she had imagined, his features more defined. He wore a simple button-down shirt and slacks, no tie, no suit jacket, less the CEO, more the man. He turned as the elevator doors opened, and his eyes found hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Oh, you came," he said finally, his voice deep and warm. "I did," Jasmine replied, surprising herself with how steady she sounded. "I wasn't sure you would," he admitted. "Neither was I," she said honestly. He smiled at that, and something in his expression softened. "I've had conversations with powerful business leaders, politicians, celebrities. None of them made me as nervous as meeting you tonight." Jasmine felt a smile tugging at her lips. "I changed in a department store fitting room," she confessed. "I couldn't meet you in my cleaning uniform." Graham laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his serious face. "I considered wearing a t-shirt and jeans to even the playing field. My assistant vetoed the idea." The tension broken, Jasmine stepped further into the apartment. "So this is where Graham Westfield hides when he's not at the other penthouse?" He nodded. "This is where I come when I need to escape. No one knows about this place except Margaret, and now you." The significance of that wasn't lost on Jasmine. He was letting her into a part of his life he kept private from the world. "I thought we could have dinner," Graham said, gesturing toward a small table set for 2 by the window. "Nothing fancy, just a conversation that doesn't involve paper and pens." "I'd like that," Jasmine said. As Graham led her to the table, she noticed his hand hovering near the small of her back, not quite touching her. Always the gentleman. The table was set beautifully, with candles and fresh flowers. A bottle of wine was open, breathing. The meal was already laid out. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. "Did you cook this?" Jasmine asked, surprised. Graham laughed again. "No, that would have been a disaster. I had it catered, but I did set the table myself." "Very impressive," she teased. As they sat down, Graham's expression grew more serious. "I keep asking myself what I'm doing," he admitted. "This isn't like me. I don't connect with people easily." "I've noticed," Jasmine said. "You're known for being rather distant at work. You've heard about me?" "The cleaning staff talk," she said with a small smile. "You're a bit of a legend. The demanding boss who notices every detail, but never the people." Graham winced. "Ouch. But fair." He paused. "And yet you saw something else." "I saw your notes," Jasmine said simply. "I saw the man who watched a cleaning woman sleep and thought about peace instead of firing her." Graham's eyes held hers. "There's something about you, Jasmine Cole. Something that made me want to know more, something that made me want to be seen." The honesty of his words touched her deeply. "I think we all want that," she said softly, "to be truly seen." They ate dinner slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Graham asked about her grandfather, and Jasmine shared stories of growing up in the church, of the community that had become her family. She asked about his hotels, and he told her about his dream of creating spaces where people felt both luxury and comfort. The conversation flowed easily, as if they had known each other for years instead of weeks. The notes had laid a foundation that now supported something more. As they finished dessert, a rich chocolate cake that Jasmine declared the best she'd ever tasted, Graham reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't know what happens next," he said honestly. "This is uncharted territory for me." "For me too," Jasmine admitted. I don't exactly make a habit of having dinner with the men whose penthouses I clean. Graham smiled, but his eyes remained serious. I just know that I want to see you again, not as my cleaning woman, not as my employee, but as you, as Jasmine. The vulnerability in his voice moved her. This powerful man, this CEO who commanded an empire, was opening himself up to her, showing her a side of himself that few, if any, had seen. I'd like that, she said softly. As he walked her to the elevator later that evening, Graham hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her cheek gently. Thank you for coming tonight, he said, for taking a chance on whatever this is. Jasmine felt a warmth spread through her at his touch. Thank you for the invitation, she said, and for seeing me as more than just the woman who cleans your home. As the elevator doors closed between them, Jasmine felt as though she was standing on the edge of something new and unexpected, something that both excited and frightened her. What she didn't know was that Graham was feeling exactly the same way. The next morning, Margaret entered Graham's office with his usual coffee and stopped short. Her boss was smiling, actually smiling, at 8 a.m. on a Friday. Good morning, Margaret, he said cheerfully. Good morning, Mr. Westfield, she replied cautiously. Are you feeling all right? Never better, he said. Can you clear my schedule for Sunday evening? I have plans. Margaret raised an eyebrow but made a note in her tablet. Of course. Anything else? Graham hesitated, then said, Yes. I'd like information on Hope Community Church. It's in Harlem, I believe. Now both of Margaret's eyebrows were raised. A church, sir? Yes, Margaret. A church. Is that a problem? Not at all, she said quickly. I'll have the information for you by noon. As she left his office, Margaret wondered what exactly had happened the previous night. Whatever it was, it had changed something in Graham Westfield, and from what she could see, it was a change for the better. Jasmine arrived at Mrs. Henderson's apartment that afternoon, still floating on the memory of her dinner with Graham. Well, look at you, Mrs. Henderson said as soon as she walked in. Someone's walking on air today. Jasmine smiled as she helped the older woman to her favorite chair. Is it that obvious? Honey, you're practically glowing. Don't tell me you finally met someone. Maybe, Jasmine admitted. It's complicated. The good ones always are, Mrs. Henderson said wisely. Tell me about him. As Jasmine prepared lunch, she found herself sharing bits and pieces of her story with Graham. The notes, the dinner, the connection they had formed. He's unlike anyone I've ever met, she said. He's powerful and successful, but also lonely, I think. There's a gentleness in him that he doesn't show to the world. Mrs. Henderson listened thoughtfully. Sounds like you're seeing the man behind the mask, she said. That's rare and precious. But be careful with your heart, Jasmine. Men like that, with money and power, they live in a different world. I know, Jasmine said softly. Believe me, I know. Later that evening, as Jasmine cleaned another client's apartment, she had been taken off the Westfield penthouse rotation, a change she understood but still felt strange about. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sunday evening, dinner at my place again, or somewhere else if you prefer. Your choice. Graham. Jasmine smiled at his directness. She could almost hear his voice in the words. She typed back, Your place was perfect. Sunday works for me. His reply came almost immediately. I'm looking forward to it. More than you know. Jasmine tucked her phone away, but the warmth of his words stayed with her as she finished her work. Whatever was happening between them, whatever bridge they were building between their different worlds, she was no longer fighting it. She was embracing it, with all its uncertainty and promise. Sunday evening couldn't come soon enough for Jasmine. She found herself counting the hours, something she hadn't done since she was a child waiting for Christmas morning. Graham Westfield had awakened something in her that had been dormant for a long time. Hope, excitement, possibility. She chose her outfit carefully, a simple green dress that her grandfather had bought her for her college graduation. It was the nicest thing she owned, and she hadn't worn it since his funeral. What do you think, Grandpa? She asked aloud as she looked at herself in the mirror. Am I being foolish? She could almost hear his deep, warm laugh. Follow your heart, Jazzy, he would have said, but keep your eyes open. When she arrived at Graham's private penthouse that evening, she found him waiting for her, a nervous smile on his face. You look beautiful, he said simply. Thank you, she replied, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. You clean up pretty well yourself, he laughed, the sound more relaxed than the first time they'd met. I try, though I have to admit I changed my shirt 3 times. I haven't been this nervous for a date since high school. Is that what this is? Jasmine asked, surprising herself with her boldness. A date? Graham looked directly into her eyes. I'd like it to be, if that's okay with you. It's more than okay, she said softly. Dinner was even better than their first meeting. Graham had ordered from a different restaurant, and they sat at the small table by the window, watching the city lights twinkle below them. They talked about everything: her childhood with her grandfather, his complicated relationship with his father, their dreams and disappointments. I never thought I'd be running the company this soon, Graham admitted. My father had a heart attack when I was 28. Suddenly, I was in charge of an empire I wasn't sure I even wanted. Do you want it now? Jasmine asked. Graham considered the question. Parts of it. I love creating beautiful spaces for people. I love the challenge of making something excellent, but the politics of it, the constant pressure, the loneliness at the top, that I could do without. Jasmine nodded. My grandfather used to say that success without someone to share it with is like a beautiful song that no one ever hears. Your grandfather was a wise man, Graham said. I wish I could have met him. He would have liked you, Jasmine said. Once he got past the fancy suits and the CEO title. Graham smiled. And what about you? Do you like me past the fancy suits and the CEO title? Jasmine held his gaze. I think I'm getting there. After dinner, Graham surprised her by taking her hand and leading her to the kitchen. I have a confession to make, he said. I can't cook to save my life, but I've always wanted to learn. I thought maybe... You want me to teach you? Jasmine asked, delighted. If you wouldn't mind, I know you do catering as one of your jobs, and I thought... I'd love to, she interrupted. Where do we start? For the next hour, Jasmine taught Graham how to make a simple dessert. Warm chocolate brownies with vanilla ice cream. He was a surprisingly attentive student, following her instructions carefully, laughing when he made mistakes. As they sat at the counter eating their creation, Graham looked at her with a warmth that made her heart race. Thank you, he said. For the cooking lesson? She asked. For that. For coming tonight. For writing that first note. For falling asleep on my sofa. He took her hand in his. For waking something in me that I didn't know was asleep. Jasmine felt tears prick her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, Graham leaned forward and kissed her softly on the lips. It was a gentle kiss, tender and questioning. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. I'd like to see you again, he said, and again after that. I want to know everything about you, Jasmine Cole. I'd like that too, she whispered. As he walked her to the elevator later that night, Graham asked, When can I see you again? I know you're busy with your jobs. Tomorrow evening, Jasmine suggested. I finish with Mrs. Henderson at 6. I'll pick you up, Graham said. If that's all right. It's all right, she said, smiling as the elevator doors closed between them. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind for Jasmine. Graham wove himself into her life in ways both big and small. He picked her up after her shifts with Mrs. Henderson. He brought her lunch when she was catering weekend events. He sent her texts throughout the day, little messages that made her smile. For their third date, he surprised her by taking her to a small, family-owned Italian restaurant instead of one of the fancy places he usually frequented. How did you find this place? She asked as they enjoyed the best pasta she'd ever tasted. Research, Graham said with a smile. I asked around for the best Italian food in the city that doesn't cost a week's salary. The fact that he had made that effort, that he was trying to find places where she would feel comfortable, touched her deeply. You didn't have to do that, she said. I wanted to, he replied simply. I want you to enjoy our time together, not worry about the price of the wine. Later that evening, as they walked hand in hand through a nearby park, Graham stopped and turned to face her. There's something I need to tell you, he said, his expression serious. Jasmine felt a flutter of anxiety. What is it? I've never felt this way about anyone before, he said, his voice low and intense. When I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe, like I don't have to be the CEO or my father's son. I can just be me. Jasmine felt tears fill her eyes. I feel the same way, she whispered. Graham pulled her into his arms and kissed her, more deeply than before. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I think I'm falling in love with you, Jasmine Cole, he said softly. I think I'm falling in love with you too, Graham Westfield, she replied. As their relationship deepened, they began to share more of their lives with each other. Graham attended Sunday service at Hope Community Church with Jasmine, sitting quietly beside her in the pew, listening intently to Pastor Williams's sermon. Afterward, as they greeted people in the church basement, Jasmine introduced him simply as my friend Graham. But the knowing smiles from the congregation, especially from Pastor Williams, told her they saw the truth. "Your grandfather would be proud of you," Pastor Williams told her as they were leaving. "You've kept his spirit of generosity alive in this church." Graham looked at her curiously as they walked to his car. What did he mean by that? Jasmine hesitated, then decided on honesty. "After my grandfather died, he left me a small life insurance policy. Even though I needed the money for bills, I donated part of it to the church's food pantry. It was what he would have wanted." Graham was silent for a moment. "You amaze me," he said finally. "You work 3 jobs. You're drowning in medical bills from your grandfather's illness, and yet you still give to others." Jasmine shrugged, uncomfortable with his praise. "It's not a big deal. It's just what we do for each other." Graham took her hand. "It is a big deal. You're a big deal, Jasmine Cole, and I'm the luckiest man alive to have found you." The following week, Graham invited Jasmine to attend a charity gala with him, her first public appearance as his date. She was nervous about meeting his colleagues and friends, about fitting into his world of wealth and privilege. "What if they don't like me?" she asked, as she tried on the 5th dress at the boutique Graham had insisted on taking her to. "Then they're idiots," Graham said firmly, "and I don't associate with idiots." Jasmine laughed, but her anxiety remained. "You know what I mean. I'm not from your world, Graham. I clean houses for a living." Graham took her hands in his. "You are the most genuine, hard-working, kind-hearted person I've ever met. Anyone who can't see how amazing you are doesn't deserve to know you." His words gave her courage, and she chose a simple but elegant black dress that made her feel both beautiful and confident. The night of the gala, Graham picked her up in his chauffeur-driven car. When he saw her, his eyes widened. "You are breathtaking," he said, his voice husky. Jasmine smiled, taking in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. "You're not so bad yourself." As they entered the grand ballroom of the Westfield Plaza Hotel, Jasmine felt the eyes of the other guests on them. Graham kept his hand at the small of her back, a protective, possessive gesture that gave her strength. "Graham, there you are." A tall, elegantly dressed woman approached them, air-kissing Graham on both cheeks. "We were beginning to think you weren't coming." "Wouldn't miss it, Victoria," Graham said smoothly. "May I introduce Jasmine Cole? Jasmine, this is Victoria Bentley, our head of marketing." Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly as she assessed Jasmine. "Charmed," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "And how did you two meet? I don't believe I've seen you at any of our industry events before, Ms. Cole." Before Jasmine could answer, Graham said, "Jasmine and I met at my apartment. She saw me in a way no one else ever has." Victoria looked confused, but Graham just smiled and guided Jasmine away. "Ignore her," he whispered. "She's been trying to set me up with her niece for years." Throughout the evening, Jasmine met dozens of Graham's colleagues and business associates. Some, like Victoria, were clearly curious about her background. Others were warmly welcoming, especially Margaret, Graham's assistant, who squeezed her hand and whispered, "I've never seen him this happy." Midway through the evening, as the band played a slow song, Graham led Jasmine to the dance floor. "Are you having an awful time?" he asked as they swayed to the music. "Not awful," she said with a small smile. "Just overwhelming. Everyone here is so privileged, entitled, boring," Graham suggested. Jasmine laughed. "I was going to say polished. They all seem to know exactly what to say, what to wear, which fork to use." "It's all an act," Graham said. "Trust me, half of them are drowning in debt trying to maintain appearances, and the other half are miserable despite their money." "And which half are you in?" Jasmine asked softly. Graham looked down at her, his eyes serious. "Until I met you, probably the miserable half now. Now I'm in a category all my own." He bent down and kissed her, right there on the dance floor, in front of everyone. When he pulled back, Jasmine saw a flash of camera light. Someone had taken a picture. "Should we be worried about that?" she asked. Graham shook his head. "Let them talk. I'm not hiding how I feel about you." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. As they were leaving, a distinguished older man stopped them. "Graham," he said, his voice sharp. "A word." Graham tensed beside her. "Jasmine, this is Richard Westfield, my father." Jasmine's eyes widened. Graham had told her his father had retired as CEO after his heart attack, but still served as chairman of the board. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Westfield," she said, extending her hand. Richard Westfield ignored it, looking instead at his son. "In private, Graham." Graham's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Wait for me in the car," he told Jasmine. "I'll just be a minute." Jasmine made her way to the car, feeling Richard Westfield's cold eyes on her back the entire way. 10 minutes later, Graham joined her, his face like thunder. "What happened?" she asked as the car pulled away from the hotel. "Nothing important," Graham said, but his voice was tight with anger. "Graham," Jasmine said softly, "talk to me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "My father has concerns, Ace, about our relationship, about you." "Because I'm a cleaning woman?" Jasmine asked, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. "Because you're not from our social circle," Graham said bitterly. "Because he's a snob and a control freak who thinks he can still dictate my life." "What did you tell him?" Graham took her hand. "I told him that for the first time in my life, I've found someone who makes me happy, someone real, someone who sees me, not my bank account or my last name, and if he can't accept that, it's his loss." Jasmine leaned against him, feeling both touched by his defense of her and worried about the rift it might cause in his family. "I don't want to come between you and your father," she said. "You're not," Graham assured her. "He and I have been at odds for years. This is just the latest battle in a very long war." When they reached Jasmine's apartment building, Graham walked her to her door. "I'm sorry about tonight," he said. "About my father." "Don't be," Jasmine said. "I had a wonderful time with you. That's all that matters." Graham kissed her goodnight, holding her tightly as if afraid to let her go. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. It was the first time he had said the words directly. "I love you too," she replied, knowing in her heart it was true. The next morning, Jasmine was startled to see her phone ringing with a call from Mrs. Henderson. "Mrs. Henderson, is everything all right?" she answered, concerned because the elderly woman rarely called her. "Oh, Jasmine, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to warn you. You're in the newspaper." "What?" Jasmine felt her stomach drop. "Page 6 of the New York Post. There's a picture of you and a man they're calling Hotel Mogul Graham Westfield. The article. It's not very nice, dear." With shaking hands, Jasmine hung up and went online to find the article. There it was, a photo of her and Graham kissing on the dance floor under the headline, "Westfield Airs Cinderella Story. CEO Falls for Cleaning Woman." The article was short but cutting, describing her as an unknown woman from Harlem who works as a maid in Westfield's penthouse apartment. It quoted an unnamed source, saying the relationship was a phase and unlikely to last once the novelty wears off. Jasmine felt sick. She had known there would be gossip, but seeing it in black and white, so dismissive of her and what she and Graham shared, was painful. Her phone rang again. It was Graham. "Have you seen it?" he asked without preamble. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry, Jasmine. This is exactly why I've avoided relationships in the public eye. The press can be cruel." "It's okay," she said, though it wasn't. "I knew what I was getting into." "No, it's not okay," Graham said firmly. "I've already called the paper's editor. They'll be printing a retraction and an apology." "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do," he interrupted. "No one talks about the woman I love that way. No one." His protectiveness warmed her, but the article had planted seeds of doubt in her mind. Was she just a novelty to Graham? A Cinderella story that would eventually end? "Graham," she said slowly, "do you ever wonder if we're too different? If this can really work?" There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. Then Graham said, "I'm coming over. We need to talk about this in person." 30 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Graham stood there, still in the clothes he'd worn the day before, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "May I come in?" he asked. Jasmine stepped aside to let him enter. It was the first time he had been to her apartment, and she was acutely aware of how small and modest it was compared to his penthouses. Graham didn't seem to notice or care. He took both her hands in his. "Listen to me," he said intently. "I don't care what the newspapers say. I don't care what my father thinks. I don't care about any of it. The only thing I care about is you. Us." "But they're right, aren't they?" Jasmine said, voicing the fear that had been growing since she read the article. "We are from different worlds. You're a CEO. I clean houses for a living." "And that matters to you?" Graham asked, searching her face. Jasmine hesitated. "No," she said finally. "What matters to me is that when I'm with you, I feel like I can be myself. I feel understood. I feel loved." "That's what matters to me too," Graham said. "Everything else is just noise." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I've spent my whole life trying to live up to my father's expectations, trying to be the perfect CEO, the perfect Westfield. With you, I don't have to try. I can just be." Jasmine buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "We can make this work," Graham continued, "if we both want it badly enough. Do you want it, Jasmine? Do you want us?" She looked up at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes. The hope and fear mingled there. In that moment, she saw past the wealth, past the privilege, to the man beneath, the man who had watched her sleep and thought of peace, the man who wrote her notes and fell in love with her words, the man who was now looking at her as if she held his entire world in her hands. "Yes," she said softly, "I want us." Graham's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, Graham said, "I have an idea. Let's get away for a weekend, somewhere quiet, away from newspapers and gossip and my father's disapproval, just you and me." "I can't just leave," Jasmine protested. "I have jobs, responsibilities." "One weekend," Graham pleaded. "I'll pay whatever you would have earned. Please, Jasmine, I want to show you something." There was such earnestness in his voice that Jasmine found herself nodding. "Okay, one weekend. Pack a bag," Graham said, grinning like a boy. "We leave Friday after your shift with Mrs. Henderson. I'll pick you up." As he left her apartment, practically bouncing with excitement, Jasmine felt her doubts begin to fade. Whatever challenges they faced, whatever differences existed between them, the connection they shared was real. It was worth fighting for. Friday came quickly. True to his word, Graham picked Jasmine up after her shift with Mrs. Henderson. "Where are we going?" she asked as they drove out of the city. "It's a surprise," Graham said, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. 2 hours later, they turned onto a private road that wound through beautiful countryside. At the end of the road stood a charming farmhouse, surrounded by gardens and a small orchard. "What is this place?" Jasmine asked, as Graham parked the car. "My grandmother's house," he said, a softness in his voice she hadn't heard before. "The only place I was ever truly happy as a child." He led her inside, where a fire was already burning in the hearth. The house was cozy and welcoming, filled with comfortable furniture and family photographs. "My grandmother left it to me when she died," Graham explained. "My father wanted to sell it, said it wasn't grand enough for a Westfield property, but I refused. This is the one place in the world that's truly mine, not part of the Westfield empire." Jasmine walked around the living room, looking at the photos. One caught her eye, a young boy with Graham's eyes, grinning widely as he held up a fish. "Is this you?" she asked. Graham nodded, coming to stand beside her. "Me and my grandmother. She taught me to fish in the pond out back. My father hated that I would come home smelling like bait and pond water." "She looks kind," Jasmine said, studying the older woman in the photo, who had her arm around young Graham's shoulders, her smile as wide as his. "She was the kindest person I've ever known," Graham said, "until I met you." He showed her around the rest of the house, the kitchen where his grandmother had taught him to bake cookies, the bedroom that had been his during summer visits, the back porch where they had sat in rocking chairs watching fireflies. "I've never brought anyone here before," Graham admitted as they stood on the porch, looking out at the garden bathed in moonlight. "It's always been my private sanctuary." Jasmine squeezed his hand. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Later, as they lay together in his grandmother's old bedroom, Jasmine curled against Graham's side. She felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Here, away from the city, away from the differences in their lives, it was just the two of them, two people who had found each other against all odds. "I love you," Graham whispered in the darkness. "I love you too," Jasmine replied, and fell asleep in his arms, feeling truly safe for the first time since her grandfather died. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of happiness. They cooked together in the old kitchen. Graham taught her to fish in the pond. They picked apples in the orchard and made a pie using his grandmother's recipe. They walked hand in hand through the countryside, talking about everything and nothing. On Sunday afternoon, as they were preparing to return to the city, Graham took Jasmine's hands in his. "I want to ask you something," he said, his voice serious. Jasmine looked up at him. "What is it?" "This weekend has been the happiest of my life," Graham said. "Being here with you, in this place that means so much to me. It's made me realize something." "What?" Jasmine asked, her heart beginning to race. "I want more weekends like this. I want mornings and evenings and everything in between with you, Jasmine. I don't want to just date you. I want to build a life with you." Jasmine felt tears fill her eyes. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Graham smiled, reaching into his pocket. "I had planned to do this differently, maybe at a fancy restaurant or on a rooftop with the city lights below us. But being here with you, I realize those places aren't us, this is us." He opened his hand to reveal a small velvet box. "This was my grandmother's ring. My grandfather gave it to her right here, in this house." She left it to me with a note that said, "Give this to someone who brings you peace." Graham dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "Jasmine Cole, you fell asleep on my sofa and woke something in me I didn't know was sleeping. You brought peace into my life when I didn't even know I was missing it. Will you marry me?" Jasmine couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she nodded, holding out her trembling hand. Graham slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. "Is that a yes?" he asked when they finally broke apart, both breathless. "Yes," Jasmine whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." As they drove back to the city, Jasmine couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger, couldn't stop the joy that bubbled up inside her. She was going to marry Graham Westfield, the man behind the notes, the man who had seen her, really seen her, when no one else did. What she didn't know was that while they had been enjoying their peaceful weekend in the countryside back in the city, Richard Westfield had been busy, and the storm that was brewing would test their love in ways they couldn't imagine. When Graham and Jasmine returned to the city Sunday evening, they were still floating on the joy of their engagement. Graham dropped Jasmine at her apartment with a lingering kiss and a promise to call her in the morning. "I can't wait to tell everyone," Jasmine said, admiring the ring on her finger. "Me too," Graham replied, his eyes filled with love. "Starting with my father. It's time he accepted that you're going to be part of my life permanently." Jasmine felt a flutter of anxiety at the mention of Richard Westfield, but she pushed it aside. Nothing could dim her happiness tonight. As soon as Graham arrived at his penthouse, he knew something was wrong. Lights were on that he hadn't left on. His security code had been overridden, and sitting in his living room, a glass of his expensive scotch in hand, was his father. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming home tonight," Richard Westfield said coldly. Graham's jaw tightened. "What are you doing in my apartment?" Richard set down his glass and stood. Even at 65, he was an imposing figure, tall, distinguished, with the same chiseled features as his son, only harder, more severe. "Cleaning up your mess," Richard said, as usual. "What are you talking about?" Richard picked up a folder from the coffee table and tossed it toward Graham. "So your little dalliance here with the cleaning woman, it ends now." Graham opened the folder to find a dossier on Jasmine, her work history, her financial records, even photos of her at the church and with Mrs. Henderson. "You had her investigated?" Graham asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Of course I did," Richard said dismissively. "Someone had to look out for the family interests." "Jasmine is not a family interest," Graham said, barely containing his anger. "She's the woman I love, the woman I'm going to marry." For a moment Richard looked genuinely surprised. Then he laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Marry? You can't be serious. This girl is a nobody, a cleaning woman with 3 jobs and a mountain of debt. She's using you, Graham. Surely you can see that." "Get out," Graham said, his voice low and controlled. "Get out of my home right now." Richard's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake I've made was thinking you might actually care about my happiness," Graham replied. "Now get out before I call security." Richard picked up his coat. "This isn't over. I won't let you throw away everything we've built for some girl who fell asleep on your sofa." After his father left, Graham poured himself a drink with shaking hands. How had Richard known about Jasmine falling asleep? Who had told him? He pulled out his phone to call Jasmine, then stopped. He didn't want to worry her tonight. Tomorrow would be soon enough to deal with his father's interference. Jasmine woke the next morning, feeling happier than she had in years. She admired her engagement ring in the morning light, still hardly able to believe it was real. As she got ready for her morning cleaning job, her phone rang. It was Mrs. Henderson. "Jasmine, dear," the elderly woman said, her voice strained. "I'm afraid I have some bad news. I won't be needing your services anymore." "What?" Jasmine asked, confused. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Mrs. Henderson assured her. "It's just, my son has arranged for a full-time nurse to care for me, starting today." Something in her tone made Jasmine suspicious. "Mrs. Henderson, did something happen? This seems very sudden." There was a pause. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," Mrs. Henderson said finally, "but a man came to see me yesterday. He said he represented the Westfield family and offered to pay for a full-time nurse if I let you go." Jasmine felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "A man? Was his name Richard Westfield?" "Yes, that's it," Mrs. Henderson confirmed. "I'm so sorry, dear. I tried to refuse, but my son thought it was too good an opportunity to pass up." After hanging up, Jasmine sat on the edge of her bed, stunned. Why would Graham's father do this? And what else had he done? Her phone rang again. It was Elite Cleaning Services. "Ms. Cole," her supervisor said briskly, "I'm calling to inform you that your services are no longer required at any of our client locations." "What? Why?" Jasmine asked, her heart sinking. "We've received complaints," the woman said vaguely, "and frankly, the publicity around your relationships with Mr. Westfield has made some of our clients uncomfortable." Within an hour, Jasmine had lost 2 of her 3 jobs. Only her weekend catering position remained, and she was afraid to check if that was gone too. She tried calling Graham, but her call went straight to voicemail. She left a message, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "Graham, it's me. Something's happening. I've lost my jobs. I think your father might be behind it. Please call me back." By noon, Graham still hadn't called back. Jasmine was about to try again when there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, she found a distinguished-looking older man in an expensive suit. She recognized him immediately from the charity gala. "Mr. Westfield," she said coldly. "Ms. Cole," Richard Westfield replied with a tight smile. "May I come in? I believe we have matters to discuss." Against her better judgment, Jasmine stepped aside to let him enter. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her intimidated. Richard looked around her small apartment with barely concealed disdain. "Charming," he said insincerely. "What do you want?" Jasmine asked directly. "Did you come to tell me you've ruined my livelihood?" Richard raised an eyebrow. "Direct, aren't you? Good. Then I'll be direct as well." He reached into his jacket and removed an envelope. "I want you to end your relationship with my son." Jasmine crossed her arms. "And if I refuse?" "That would be unwise," Richard said smoothly. "You see, I've taken the liberty of looking into your financial situation. You're 3 months behind on your rent. You have medical bills from your grandfather's final illness that you'll never be able to pay on your income. And now, unfortunately, you seem to be unemployed." Jasmine felt cold all over. "You can't threaten me." "I'm not threatening you," Richard said. "I'm offering you a solution." He held out the envelope. "Inside is a check for $250,000. Enough to pay off your debts, find a new apartment, even start that little catering business you've dreamed about." Despite herself, Jasmine felt a moment of temptation. That kind of money would solve so many problems. But then she thought of Graham, of the love in his eyes when he proposed, and the temptation vanished. "I don't want your money," she said firmly. "I love your son, and he loves me." Richard's face hardened. "Love? What do you know about love? You've known each other for what, a month? 2? This isn't love, Ms. Cole. This is a rich man's infatuation with a pretty girl from the wrong side of town. It won't last." "You're wrong," Jasmine said, fighting back tears. "What Graham and I have is real." "Real?" Richard scoffed. "Let me tell you what's real. The Westfield name, the Westfield Empire. Generations of wealth and influence that my son is destined to lead. That's what's real. You're just a distraction." Jasmine lifted her chin. "If that's true, then why are you here? Why go to all this trouble to break us up?" For a moment, Richard looked taken aback. Then he regained his composure. "Because Graham has responsibilities. To the company, to the family. He can't afford to throw it all away on some romantic fantasy." "You mean he can't afford to disobey you?" Jasmine countered. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? Control. You can't stand that Graham is making his own choices." Richard's eyes flashed with anger. "You know nothing about my son or what he needs. I know he's kind and gentle and thoughtful in ways you've never bothered to notice," Jasmine said. "I know he's lonely at the top of your precious empire. I know he values peace more than power. And I know he loves me." "Then prove it," Richard challenged. "If you truly love him, you'll want what's best for him. And what's best for him is to remain the heir to the Westfield legacy, not to throw it all away for a cleaning woman." He placed the envelope on her coffee table. "The choice is yours, Ms. Cole. Take the money and disappear from my son's life, or watch as I dismantle everything he's worked for. The board of directors answers to me, not to him. With one word, I can strip him of his position, his influence, everything he's built." "You would do that to your own son?" Jasmine asked, horrified. "To save him from himself." "Yes," Richard said coldly. "You have until tomorrow to decide." After he left, Jasmine collapsed onto her sofa, tears streaming down her face. Would Richard really destroy Graham's career? Could she take that risk? She looked at the ring on her finger, the ring that had belonged to Graham's grandmother. "Give this to someone who brings you peace," the note had said. Jasmine knew what she had to do. Graham had been in meetings all morning, his phone off as he dealt with a crisis at one of the hotels. When he finally checked his messages and heard Jasmine's voice, filled with barely contained panic, he immediately tried to call her back. No answer. He left the office without explanation, driving straight to her apartment. When she didn't answer the door, he felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He called Pastor Williams at Hope Community Church, asking if he had seen Jasmine. No one had seen her since Sunday. Desperate, Graham returned to his penthouse to think. As he entered, he noticed something on the entry table that hadn't been there that morning, a small velvet box. With shaking hands, he opened it to find his grandmother's ring and a note. "Graham, I can't marry you. Our worlds are too different. I was fooling myself to think this could work. Please don't try to find me. I've gone somewhere to start over. I'll always cherish the time we had together, but it's better this way. Jasmine." Graham read the note again and again, unable to believe the words. This didn't sound like Jasmine. Something was wrong, and then he knew. His father. Rage coursed through him as he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Richard Westfield had gone too far this time. Richard Westfield was enjoying a brandy in his study when his son burst in, eyes blazing with fury. "What did you do?" Graham demanded. Richard set down his glass calmly. "I assume you're referring to your former fiancée? What did you say to her?" Graham's voice was dangerously quiet. "What did you threaten her with?" "I merely pointed out the realities of the situation," Richard said. "The girl was sensible enough to see reason." "Her name is Jasmine," Graham said through clenched teeth, "and she's the woman I love, the woman I'm going to marry." Richard shook his head. "Not anymore, it seems. She returned your ring, didn't she? Took the money and ran, just as I predicted." "Money?" Graham asked. "You paid her to leave me." "I offered her a new start," Richard corrected. "Away from all this. It was the kindest solution for everyone." Graham stepped closer to his father, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "Tell me where she is." "I have no idea," Richard said. "And if I did, I wouldn't tell you. It's over, Graham. Accept it and move on. Victoria Bentley's niece is still available, I believe. Much more suitable match." In that moment, something broke inside Graham. The last thread of respect he had for his father, the last obligation he felt to the Westfield name. "You've controlled my life for the last time," he said quietly. "I quit." Richard's composure finally cracked. "You what?" "I quit the company. I quit the board. I quit being your puppet. Find someone else to carry on the precious Westfield legacy." "Don't be ridiculous," Richard sputtered. "You can't quit. This is your birthright." "Watch me," Graham said, turning to leave. "If you walk out that door, you'll have nothing," Richard called after him. "No position, no influence, no fortune." Graham stopped and looked back at his father, a man who had everything and understood nothing. "I'll have my peace," he said simply, and walked out. Jasmine sat on a bench in Hope Community Church, staring at the stained glass window her grandfather had loved so much. It depicted the Good Shepherd finding his lost sheep. She had come here after leaving Graham's ring, unable to go back to her apartment, unable to face what she had done. She had not taken Richard's money. She could never do that. But she had given up Graham to protect him, and the pain was almost unbearable. "I thought I might find you here," came a gentle voice. Pastor Williams sat down beside her, his kind eyes filled with concern. "Graham Westfield has been looking everywhere for you," he said. Jasmine wiped away tears. "I can't see him. I can't explain." "Can't or won't?" Pastor Williams asked gently. "His father threatened to destroy Graham's career if I didn't leave him," Jasmine admitted. "Everything Graham has worked for, gone because of me. I couldn't let that happen." Pastor Williams was quiet for a moment. "Your grandfather used to say that love isn't love if it makes decisions for the other person. It has to trust them, to choose for themselves." "What does that mean?" Jasmine asked. "It means that by leaving Graham to protect him, you took away his choice," Pastor Williams explained. "You decided what was best for him without giving him a say." Jasmine hadn't thought of it that way. "I was just trying to protect him." "I know," Pastor Williams said kindly. "But real love means standing together, facing troubles together, not running away to shield the other person." As his words sank in, the church door opened. Jasmine looked up to see Graham standing there, his eyes finding hers immediately. Pastor Williams patted her hand and stood up. "I believe you two have some talking to do," he said, and quietly left the church. Graham walked slowly down the aisle and sat beside Jasmine, leaving a small space between them. "Your father told you," Jasmine said, her voice barely above a whisper. Graham nodded. "Some of it. I'd like to hear the rest from you." Jasmine told him everything. The lost jobs, Richard's visit, the threats, the money she hadn't taken, the impossible choice she thought she had to make. I just wanted to protect you, she finished, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't be the reason you lost everything you've worked for. Graham took her hand, his thumb brushing over the empty spot where his grandmother's ring had been. Jasmine, look at me, he said gently. When she raised her eyes to his, he continued, You are not the reason for anything my father does. His actions are his own, his manipulations, his threats, those are on him, not you. But your career— I quit, Graham said simply. Jasmine stared at him in shock. You what? I quit the company. I walked away from all of it. And you know what? For the first time in my life, I feel free. But the Westfield empire, but your hotel as your legacy. Graham shook his head. None of that matters without you. When I read your note, when I thought I'd lost you, I realized something. Success, power, wealth. They're meaningless if I have to sacrifice my soul to get them. And that's what I've been doing for years. Sacrificing pieces of myself to please my father, to meet his expectations. He took both her hands in his. You brought peace into my life, Jasmine. You showed me what really matters. I won't give that up. Not for my father, not for the Westfield name, not for anything. But what will you do? Jasmine asked. Graham smiled. Remember my grandmother's house? The place where I proposed? What would you think about living there? We could fix it up, make it our home. But your work— I have ideas, Graham said, his eyes lighting up with excitement. I've always wanted to create smaller, more personal hotels. Places that feel like home, not like cold showcases of wealth. I have savings, investments my father can't touch. We could start something new, together. Jasmine couldn't believe what she was hearing. You would give up everything. For me? Not for you, Graham corrected gently. For us. For the life we could build together. A life with purpose and meaning and peace. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box containing his grandmother's ring. I'm asking you again, Jasmine Cole. Will you marry me? Will you build a new life with me? One that isn't defined by my father's expectations or the Westfield name, but by what we create together? Looking into his eyes, Jasmine saw nothing but love and certainty. He had made his choice, just as she had made hers. But while she had chosen to run away to protect him, he had chosen to stand and fight for them. Yes, she whispered, as fresh tears, happy ones this time, filled her eyes. Yes, I'll marry you. Graham slipped the ring back onto her finger, where it belonged, and kissed her with all the love in his heart. 6 months later, Jasmine stood in the garden of what was now their home, the old farmhouse that had belonged to Graham's grandmother. The place was transformed, the gardens restored to their former glory, the house renovated but still maintaining its cozy charm. She watched as Graham showed Pastor Williams the small pond where they planned to build a gazebo for the wedding ceremony. Her wedding dress hung upstairs, simple but beautiful, just like this place they now called home. So much had changed in the past months. Graham had started his new hotel venture, small boutique establishments that focused on personal service and comfort rather than opulence. The first one had opened a month ago to rave reviews. 2 more were in development. Jasmine had used her catering experience to create farm-to-table dining experiences at each location, using local ingredients and recipes inspired by Graham's grandmother's cooking. They worked side by side, building something together that was uniquely theirs. And at the end of each day they returned to the farmhouse to peace. Richard Westfield had cut off all contact with his son after Graham quit. The Westfield empire continued without him, cold and impersonal, while Graham's new ventures thrived with warmth and character. Mrs. Henderson had fired the nurse Richard had hired and called Jasmine the very day after Graham found her at the church. She now lived in a comfortable cottage on their property, where Jasmine still helped care for her 3 days a week. "Penny for your thoughts," came Graham's voice as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. Jasmine leaned back against him, feeling the solid strength of him, the security of his love. "I was just thinking about how it all started," she said, "with me falling asleep on your sofa." Graham chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her back. "Best cleaning mishap ever. Do you ever regret it?" she asked, turning in his arms to face him. "Giving up everything for this? For me?" Graham looked around at the home they had created, then back at the woman who had brought peace into his life. "I didn't give up everything," he said softly. "I gained everything that matters." He kissed her then, as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, casting a warm glow over the farmhouse, the gardens, and the 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. "You fell asleep on my sofa," Graham whispered against her lips, "and I started falling in love." "And I've been falling ever since," Jasmine replied. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Jasmine rested her head on Graham's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. On her finger, his grandmother's ring caught the moonlight streaming through the window. "Graham," she said softly. "Hmm?" he replied, already half asleep. "I'm pregnant." His eyes flew open, and he looked down at her in wonder. "Really?" Jasmine nodded, her eyes shining with joy. "Really? We're going to have a baby." Graham pulled her close, overwhelmed with emotion. "A family," he whispered. "Our family." As Jasmine drifted off to sleep in his arms, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a penthouse sofa to this farmhouse bed, from strangers to lovers to partners, from loneliness to love, all because she had stopped fighting gravity just for a moment, all because he had seen her, truly seen her, when no one else did, and in that seeing, they had both found something they hadn't even known they were looking for, a love that brought peace, a peace that felt like home. The end.